Hey y'all, we made it to the end of 2021. It's been a weird year, really weird year, but a pretty good reading year for me. I read 29 books. This is like the best reading year I've had in a minute. I read a ton when I was in like my undergraduate university because I had to read a lot for school. Plus, I feel like because I had so much assigned reading, I really took advantage of those moments where I could read whatever I want, and I tried to cram in as much reading as I could. So even though I was busier, I feel like I read a lot during university. Um, then I started my first teaching job and was like permanently tired. But last year in 2020, reading was definitely a coping mechanism during all of the chaos. And so I only read 20 books last year, but they were really they were thick. So my average page length for 2020 was like 400 and something pages, which is decent, I would say. That's more than average. But this year I've read 29 books, and even though page length was kind of all over the place, I did read overall more pages this year. And so I'm going to put up some Goodreads stats up in there so you could see. So my shortest book was like The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, and my longest book was A Quart of Silver Flames, which was like 757 pages. Not the longest of long books, but still pretty long. But yeah, so anyway, today we are going to be counting down my top 8 books. That's such a random number, but I feel like I had 8 books that were like my favorites for the year, and so we're going to be counting those down right now. So my first one that I want to talk about, well, number 8 on the list is Laziness Does Not Exist by Devin Price. I read this one on my Kindle, and I thought it was pretty good. It outlines like main reasons why people feel lazy and how that's okay. Now, it's not really like you're not really lazy. There's always some kind of underlying reason behind it. The author details like basically that we are all doing more than we really are physically going to be comfortable doing. They talk about the dangers of overwork and how that can negatively impact your health. And they basically emphasized, that's my Christmas clock. They basically emphasized that we should be resting more, and that's kind of why we feel so lazy. It's not that we just, oh, I hate doing things. It's that we're tired. So I thought it was a validating read. At the time, I didn't really think it was like the most impactful though. But I feel like I did get some stuff out of it. I feel like in the past, like month or two since I finished reading it, I let myself do nothing more often. And I mean like nothing, like lay down or like watch TV. Just vibe. Because sometimes I put so much pressure on like my free time to maximize the usefulness of free time, and that's something that's also discussed in the book. So yeah, I recommend it. Great nonfiction book. Pick it up. And it's short. So like if nonfiction is not usually your jam, I feel like this is a good one to kind of get yourself going. All right, so number 7. I don't actually have a physical copy of this right now. I technically do, but my mommy is borrowing it. I don't even think she started it yet, but she's borrowing it. And it's Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Sager? I don't know. I liked this one a lot. It's a kind of horror situation. It's about this girl whose family was at one point in a haunted house. What is my cat doing? They were in a kind of haunted house, allegedly haunted, and her father wrote a book about it, and her problem is like she doesn't remember any of the things that he talks about happening, and so she's always kind of thought that it's a lie. And so she ends up going back to this house, and she wants to kind of find the truth about things. And it was good. It was very spooky. I felt like I was gripped from beginning to end. I didn't see like the twist coming. Like I had a couple potential theories for like what would happen in the end, and none of them were really on point. Like I thought it was a very good haunted house story, and I'm very basic for a good haunted house story, so I really liked that one. That's number 7. So number 6 is A Quart of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. And so here's the thing, I'm actually not the biggest ACOTAR stan out there. I loved her Throne of Glass series, but as far as the ACOTAR series, I've had like a lot of mixed feelings about it overall. Like the only one that I was really like, yes, I like this book a lot, was A Court of Mist and Fury. Other ones, there's a lot of reasons why I had mixed feelings. But a big part of it is I just felt like Feyre was not the most consistent of characters. And I was really excited when I heard that we were going to get a Nesta book, because Nesta is nothing if not consistent. Like, she's awful, but she is consistently awful. And I was really curious as to where Sarah J. Maas was going to go with her story. And I ended up really, really loving this book. I think it's my favorite one of all of the ACOTAR books. Nesta is still awful, but you understand her better. And I think that that's exactly what we needed. I didn't want to see her super glorified. I didn't want to see us like being begged to forgive her or anything. I just felt like I understood her a little bit more. Do I agree with her actions? Obviously not. And that's not the point of the book. But I thought that she had great, slow character development. I loved her relationship with Cassian. Sarah J. Maas is very good with the romance. But yeah, I thought it was super well done. My only complaint about this one was the writing. Sarah J. Maas's writing is very long-winded. And on one hand, that's nice if you're really into the characters, you get to spend a ton of time with them. But there are some like moments where I felt like the writing itself could be condensed. Not the plot points, not like the moments with the characters, just at the sentence level condensing. And I know that Read with Cindy talked about this, and she gave some really excellent examples in her review. And so she tends to trash these books, which even though like I don't hate them by any means, they're just not my favorite overall. And I did really love this one in A Court of Mist and Fury. But I think that she's hilarious. So watch her video. She talks a lot about the writing style. But yeah, loved this book. Love Sarah J. Maas's incorporation of like mental health. Excellent book. Really loved this one a lot. Number 5, I also read on my Kindle, and I got this from the library, like on the Libby app. That was my cat playing with a mouse. A fake one, not a real one, thank God. But I got this one off the Libby app. I do want to buy a physical copy because I super enjoyed it. Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I read this one recently. I really didn't know how I would feel about it, and I'd put off reading it for a while because I didn't know if I would like it or not. I saw a lot of mixed reviews, but ultimately I thought it was amazing, and it had a lot of elements that I personally love. The first half of it is definitely like a traditional Gothic novel, but in Mexico. I mean, that's why it's called Mexican Gothic. So you have this very slow first half, but if you love Gothic novels, you will love the first half. But then the second half is like so weird and unique and bizarre, and I really loved that too. But if you're expecting the whole thing to be 100% a perfectly Gothic novel, you're not quite going to get that. Those elements worked really well for me. I thought it was excellent. I love the main character. She was really fun. A lot of times people will comment on her and how she's fun and headstrong, and I feel like that's the best way to describe her. And she's fun without being too frivolous too. Like she was fun to read about. And just overall, I felt like it was very spooky, just very atmospheric. Didn't really understand where all it was going because, like I said, the second half is quite weird. But yeah, and I thought the writing was quite good as well. But yeah, definitely not. I didn't expect to love this one quite as much as I did. So that was a really lovely surprise. And I've heard that it's getting a Netflix series or something. Or maybe it was Hulu. It's getting adapted somewhere, somehow. And I'll be excited to see that. So, yay! So number 4, we're getting closer, y'all, is The Three Body Problem by Cizin Liu. I think that's how you say his name, hopefully. And this is translated by Ken Liu. I don't think that they're related in any way. This book is so cool. I talked about this one in my last wrap up as well. And my thing with The Three Body Problem is if you do not love science fiction, like love it, and if you don't love like reading about science in general, I wouldn't recommend this book. It deals with aliens. It deals with just kind of science going wrong in some ways. And I thought it was so gripping and so weird. Like, you spend so much time in the book not knowing what's happening, and that is my favorite thing about, like, a lot of science fiction. We start off just being clueless and devouring the details and stuff like that. And I thought that some of the imagery in this book is just gorgeous. There's like this immersive video game that kind of comes into play, and the imagery there was just so on point. I did think that at some points the writing, it's just a little bit slower, and how even when the action picks up, we have to kind of stop everything on occasion to kind of go into some detailed explanations. A lot of people complain about this, and like, I agree that it does kind of pull you out of the story a little bit, but I think it's ultimately, it might be more of a cultural thing. You know what I'm saying? Because different cultures and people in different parts of the world expect different things out of writing and out of stories. So I'm not like mad about this. Also, I enjoyed it so much, and it's just so different from anything I've ever read that we stand. Like even in my Goodreads review, like all these books so far I've given 5 stars and not really thought much about this one. Goodreads, I kept toggling this one between 4 and 5 because I feel like it's more of a 4.5, because sometimes that writing just kind of pulls me out just a little bit, or like, I guess I should say the pacing. But it's just, there's nothing else like it, guys. Like, this is Aliens as Aliens has not quite been done before. The science components are so cool. I totally recommend it if you love science fiction. If you don't, skip this one. This is not an intro to science fiction book, in my opinion, but it's wonderful. And I'm very excited to read the other books. I'm going to be hauling those soon. So, yay! All right, we are in the top 3, everybody. Woo! So my number 3 is Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I've read some Virginia Woolf. I got to read To the Lighthouse for a class in my undergraduate degree, and I love that book. It's one of my favorites. I need to reread it. I've read A Room of One's Own. I read Mrs. Dalloway, which I did not care about, and that's kind of what put me off of Virginia Woolf for a minute. Like, Mrs. Dalloway legit put me in a reading slump. I feel like I would have liked that one better if I was in like a class with people that it did resonate with, so that way I could hear like the discussions and whatnot. But finally, I read Orlando, and this is a very odd book and very ahead of its time. So even though it's a classic, it's about this man, Orlando, and his life going through living an extremely long time in England. And then one morning he wakes up and now she's a woman. And it's just like, there's not a whole lot of like detailed explanation as to why this happens, but it's just kind of embraced. And a lot of this book is thoughts on gender and what gender really means, and whether or not, you know, we can also look at this and see like whether or not being a man or a woman actually even really matters a whole lot to Orlando, other than the social expectations and how they change. I highlighted so many passages in this book, like it's so faded now, but I highlighted a lot as I read. And I wanted to do this in part to keep up with Virginia Woolf, because she writes in kind of a stream of consciousness kind of way, and I remembered how lost I kept getting in Mrs. Dalloway, that I wanted to make sure I was like really engrossed in the reading. But I just found myself also just highlighting some really gorgeous passages. I really loved the takes on gender in this one. Even though I'm a girl and I identify as one, I've always been okay with breaking gender expectations or straying away from those and then not thinking about it very much. Like, it doesn't matter to me. And I feel like for someone with that specific personal take on their own gender, I feel like this book really spoke to me. But I feel like this will speak to a lot of different people with different gender situations. You know what I mean? So absolutely beautiful writing, gorgeous analysis of gender and society. Definitely, honestly, I recommend this book even if you've never read Virginia Woolf before, because even though she's tricky, I felt like I could follow this one really, really easily, like a lot easier than I thought. But yeah, pick this one up if you're curious about Virginia Woolf. I think that this is a good starting point. Number 2. I kept rearranging my top 2, but I think this is ultimately what I'm going to be happiest with. My number 2 is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. I do unfortunately have the Netflix tie-in cover. It's really not my favorite. Like, it's not the worst cover by any means. I just really like the OG cover. It's just, I feel like that one really captures the vibe of the book better, but whatever. And I've not watched the Netflix adaptation yet. I've not watched the Netflix adaptation yet, but I've heard that it's good even though it's different. I'm gonna have to give it a try eventually, but holy crap, guys, this book, when I was reading it, like, even in the first 20 pages, I was just kind of like making faces at this book and being like, girl, what is happening? It's about this girl who's like going to meet her boyfriend's family for the first time, and she's, you know, talking about how she keeps thinking about maybe breaking up with him. And I don't know, she's really weird, to be honest. Like, I let my mom borrow this one and she read it fairly quickly. My best friend read this in 2 days and he doesn't read. Everyone agrees that this girl is like really weird and her circumstances are really weird. And it just gets weirder and weirder and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you get to the end, and the ending, y'all. This ending is cray. Did not see it coming. Like, I had some expectations. And yeah, I didn't expect this. But yeah, this was so engaging and I still think about it quite a bit. I love the way that it's written. I love how experimental it feels. It was awesome. So my number one book has to be a nonfiction one, which is weird for me because I don't usually read a ton of nonfiction. I read a ton of nonfiction this year, and I think that this might be the most impactful nonfiction book that I personally have ever read. It's Doing Harm, and I'm going to guess how you pronounce her name. It's by Maya Dusenberry. Maybe. This book talks about medical bias against women. And so the author basically throws this medical bias into kind of a couple different categories. How, first of all, there's just a lack of trust of women to be able to discuss their symptoms accurately. So since doctors tend to not trust us, we're not listened to, we're not diagnosed, we're sick. And then on the other hand, the author discusses how in general there is a shockingly small amount of medical research done on women. Like, even in animal testing, there are barely any female mice. Like, it's like the whole process doesn't really have women, which is silly because different things affect women in different ways. And there's even not a whole lot of research done on female hormones. Like, this whole time, like, doctors are always like, oh, you know, we don't want to use female mice, their hormones are crazy, or women's hormones interfere, or whatever. It's like, well, that's our body. So, like, we kind of need to know what's going to interact with our body, and we kind of need to know about our own hormones and stuff like that. And so she doesn't just talk about, like, female issues, though. So it's not like she's talking about, like, endometriosis. I mean, she talks about endometriosis, she talks about ovarian cancer, you know, very woman-specific things, but she also talks about how, like, heart attacks look different in women, and strokes, I believe she talks about. Like, there's so many different things, and she talks about autoimmune diseases since they disproportionately affect women. It's just a lot of disheartening information, I'm not going to lie. It was kind of tricky to read it at some points. The whole reason why I wanted to read this book is because I had been struggling with doctors not listening to me, and I turned out being right. And the same thing happened to my cousin, but like 8,000 times over. And so it just kind of felt like, a gender thing. It kind of felt like a just don't listen to this crazy woman sort of thing. And based off of this book, I'm right. Like, that is how we're often viewed, which sucks. But the reason why I rated this book so highly, not only does the research really stick with me, it's just, I feel like it really inspired me at the end, because even though Maya Dusenberry is like presenting us with all of this horrible information, she also shows the importance of, if you have the resources, if you have the time and the money, to advocate for yourself. So if you think that a doctor's not listening to you, ditch him, find a new one. Don't like her? Ditch her, find a new one. If you can afford to do that, she's like, do it, because it's worth it. You're not being dramatic. This is your health, and you're entitled to accurate information about your health. You're entitled to a doctor that will actually listen to you and not look at you like you're stupid or you're crazy. And so I was starting to get disheartened once again, because like I got kind of one medical issue resolved over the past year, and I'm like, all right, so the last thing for me that's left is my allergies. My allergies suck. My doctor keeps prescribing the same allergy medications that I've repeatedly told him are not working. I want to just take this into my own hands. And so it ended up being more complicated than it should have been to get allergy tested in the first place. Thanks to my lovely doctor, I ended up getting myself a specialist. And I found out that my whole life was a lie and that I don't have allergies. I actually have migraines. And so I was actually ready to kind of give up after my doctor was kind of giving me a hard time with the whole allergy testing thing and not really being very helpful about the whole thing. But this book inspired me to take it a step further. And I'm really happy that I did, because now that I actually have an accurate diagnosis, I have migraine-specific medication, a prescription that has almost completely eliminated all of my headaches and what I thought was sinus pressure. And so I also have like a backup medication that works specifically on migraines. It's a triptan. And it never fails to work. Anytime I've had a breakthrough, which is almost never, but like it's happened about 3 or 4 times in the past, like 4 months, it works. And so this has like helped me every single day. And I feel like I kind of owe that last boost of resilience to take that a step forward to this book. And it's something I'm always going to keep in mind throughout my life if I ever feel like there's something wrong, that it really is my right to demand something better, to look for someone better. So that got really real. But yeah, so this is why I also call it like my favorite books. It's not like necessarily objective per se. Like some of it is personal, because I feel like as a reader, it's hard to not have a personal connection with the book and have that affect like my rating for it and stuff like that. But yeah, so nice blended genres I feel like this year. I mean, there's fantasy, horror, science fiction, nonfiction, literary fiction. I feel like I've got a pretty well-rounded list, if I would say so myself. But yeah, I think it was a great reading year. I really love these books. I totally recommend them. So if you feel like you're kind of interested in these, I would say go for it. But yeah, hopefully y'all also had a good reading year. Thanks for watching. Bye.